right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're super excited to be kicking off Spring CRIMSI today with our informational session for our districts to give folks an overview of what's coming in the spring and then some immediate next steps. My name is Valerie Johnson. I'm the Director of HQIM Implementation here at TEA, and I have the privilege to work with a fantastic team to lead CRIMSI and several other of our implementation initiatives to help support our districts across Texas. So first, why are we here? So the overall objectives for CRIMSI, obviously the first is to provide the opportunity for districts and schools to pilot these high quality instructional materials. Also to help reduce the COVID-related learning loss for students. So we've had a lot of data come in showing that we have a lot of learning acceleration that needs to be done, and high quality instructional materials is a key part to doing that. Last is to provide professional learning and other supports to teachers, coaches, and leaders to support that implementation. For the Spring CRIMSI unit or module level pilot, we have a couple of additional objectives. So the first is this allows teachers to try out the product. So they're just implementing for one unit or module versus the full year. And really be able to get a feel for what that is and what it looks like to implement and start to see that impact on student outcomes and student engagement. The spring pilot is also a great opportunity for coaches and leaders to better understand what this looks like for full year implementation and what it will take to do that if you choose to move forward with that. And then begin building buy-in for that. So if you do decide that you want to scale and do full year implementation, and this is a great way to start getting folks excited for moving forward with that. So our spring pilot includes our K-12 products. So pre-K is not included in our spring pilot, but we do have our Amplify Texas products for K-5, our Eureka Math and PhD Science products for K-5, our Carnegie Math product for 6-12, our Amplify ELAR Texas product for 6-8, and then our Odell Texas product for 9-12. There's 4 key supports that we provide for CRIMSI participants. So the first is supports for y'all, the districts and school leaders. So providing planning and implementation supports to make sure you're set up for success to support your teachers and coaches as they go through the pilot. The next is providing product-specific professional learning for teachers and coaches. So really helping them get deep into the materials and internalize the materials to support their implementation of that. The next support is print materials. So that includes manipulatives and trade books for the recommended unit. And then we will be providing $1,000 stipends for teachers and $1,000 stipends for coaches who complete all the pilot requirements. So here's our tentative timeline. So I'm going to quickly walk you through this, but to orient you to the slide, you'll see that we've split this out into 2 blocks. So the first phase of the pilot will be focused on grades 3 through 12. So we bumped this up in the semester because we wanted to make sure that folks have time on the back end before we enter STAR. So that's why the grades 3-12 pilot are bumped up a bit. And then we'll be running the grades K2 pilot a little later in the semester. You'll see here that the green bars are when we're going to have materials being shipped out. So print materials arriving, getting digital access set up. And then those orange bars are going to be for onboarding. So we'll talk more about that in a minute, but that's for some asynchronous modules that teachers will have and coaches and leaders will have, as you can see here, about 3 weeks to complete a short set of modules to prepare them for kickoff. We'll then have collective learning, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like for teachers and coaches in a minute. That will begin right before we would recommend the implementation window begins. so folks get their first set of learning in before they start implementing, and then implementation extending across, varying by products, but about 6 or 7 weeks. We know that implementation window is going to vary. We also know there's spring break up in here. So we'll talk a little bit more about some next steps related to that as we in the presentation. So for print materials, so as a reminder, we are providing the print materials, which includes manipulatives and trade books, for the recommended unit only. If you're choosing to do a different unit, we won't be providing those materials. We are also working to pull together materials inventories, as well as a list of any additional supplies that may be needed. So Post-it notes, crayons, paper clips, so that folks have those ahead of time to prepare. And you can scan this handy dandy QR code to access the TEA help desk if you have any questions about print orders or any issues that you need to resolve there. For digital materials, so all materials are available free digitally, and you can sign up for free accounts. Those are all linked on our texasHomeLearning.org website. However, some products have additional capabilities to roster students. And so you can see for each of our products here, which ones do and do not have rostering capabilities, and which ones where that is required in order to implement fully. So specifically our Amplify 6.8 product and our Carnegie 6.12 to access Mathia. We'll be talking a little bit more about next steps on how to get that rostering set up before onboarding. For our onboarding modules, so this will be a set of asynchronous supports that'll get folks up to speed both on the pilot and the product. So pilot onboarding will really introduce folks to the different supports that they're being provided through CRIMSI and provide information on each stipend requirement, as well as how stipends will be administered, when they'll be paid out, how they can track that. It'll also include some tutorials on how to navigate TEA Learn, including how to submit assignments to help folks get ready to start navigating that platform. For products, they'll have an intro to the product design, the key instructional philosophies, key components within individual products, as well as tutorials on navigating the materials, especially the digital platforms. And then most exciting, folks will start digging into the actual recommended unit or module after the spring pilot and start to see what they'll be diving into over the course of implementation. For collective learning for teachers, so teachers are going to be required to attend 3 core sessions that'll focus on some of our key practices and protocols. For example, unit internalization and lesson internalization. All teachers will go to those sessions. All teachers will also select 2 choice sessions out of a list of different options to complete to really be able to provide differentiated support to teachers based on what they need. So examples of choice sessions might be bilingual implementation. Another one might be around pacing. So we'll be building out that list of options for teachers to choose from, and they get to pick 2, although they are welcome to observe others as well. Teachers will also be participating in an implementation community of practice. This will be product and grade specific, and with all of the other teachers who are participating in the CRIMSI pilot across Texas. This will really focus on discussing problems of practice related to implementation and working together to problem solve some of the challenges and really celebrate the little wins and the big wins. One of the things we've heard most from our current full year CRIMSI folks is how helpful it has been to be able to talk to other teachers and other coaches who are in the same scenario, facing the same challenges, and being able to give ideas on what they're doing and whether that worked and didn't work, in addition to learning from our expert facilitators, being able to learn from each other. So we're excited to continue that. In terms of requirements for the $1,000 stipend for teachers, So the first set of requirements is related to learning. So folks will need to complete the onboarding modules and submit an exit ticket for that. Similarly, they'll need to attend the collective learning sessions, so the 3 required sessions plus 2 choice sessions, and submit exit tickets for that. We'll talk a little bit more about assessment data on the next slide, but this will include submitting some student and item level data from the end of unit or end of module assessment, and then submitting a couple of student work samples as well. And then we will have teachers submit surveys to provide us with feedback both on the product and the pilot as we really work towards continuous improvement of both. Teachers are eligible for a maximum of 2 stipends if they're piloting 2 different products and they meet the requirements for all of those. So for example, if I'm piloting both Amplify K5 and Eureka K5, and I go to all the collective learning sessions for both, do the onboarding for both, submit data for both, submit surveys for both, then I could earn a $2,000 stipend as well. In terms of assessment data, so we're collecting this data to really be able to provide leaders, coaches, and teachers with a snapshot of outcomes. So that's why we're all here, right? Is to really make sure that we're getting to outcomes for kids. And so data is really important to help us understand that. This will also inform our continuous improvement to both the instructional materials themselves and the implementation supports we provide to help teachers, coaches, and leaders get to those student outcomes. Want to really emphasize that data collection is not evaluative of individual teachers, coaches, schools, or districts. This is really in an effort to inform continuous improvement and help folks make decisions based on the outcomes that they're seeing from implementation. For the student level and item level assessment data, so we're partnering with a couple of different platforms to provide an easy button option for submitting that data. So Eduphoria and DMAC are working on adapting the keys and rubrics from the Texas Home Learning Materials so that folks will be able to submit those through Eduphoria and DMAC if y'all use those platforms. And then we are working on standing up TFAR, our own platform for select products that folks can opt into as well. If districts don't have access to any of those, we will have an alternative survey form that folks can quickly fill out to submit that data. We'll provide a lot more guidance on what this looks like during the onboarding. In terms of student work samples, so we'll be asking for 3 anonymized work samples from the end of unit or end of module assessment, 1 at grade level, 1 above grade level, and 1 below grade level. We'll also be providing a lot more guidance on how to identify and select and then submit those samples during onboarding as well. Let's shift gears and talk about coaches. So for collective learning for coaches, they'll be required to attend 4 core sessions, again, really focusing on those key practices and protocols and how they can lead teachers through those practices and protocols. So for example, how to lead a lesson internalization, how to lead a lesson rehearsal, and how to conduct observations and debrief those with teachers. Coaches will also have access to the teacher collective learning, and we highly recommend that they go in and see what their teachers are learning through those observer courses to better understand the many things that teachers are learning in addition to the many things that coaches are learning. They'll similarly have a community of practice, and this will be product specific with other coaches across Texas. With problems of practice really focused on how to support teachers with implementation. We've been doing this with our full year CRIMSI coaches and have gotten just such positive feedback on the problem solving that's come out of those problems of practice sessions that they've been having with other coaches during the sessions. So really excited again to continue those for spring CRIMSI. The requirements for the $1,000 stipend for coaches, and similar to teachers, they are eligible for a maximum of 2 if they complete all requirements for 2 different products. Same requirements for collective learning. So onboarding with the exit ticket, those 4 collective learning sessions with the exit ticket. And then instead of submitting student data, they'll actually be conducting some of those practices and protocols, really trying that out with teachers, and then submitting some confirmations of that. So they'll be asked to lead a lesson internalization and a lesson rehearsal, either with an individual teacher or with a PLC, and submit a quick confirmation of that. And then they will be required to do an implementation observation and submit a digital observation form for that. And again, finally, surveys to provide some product and pilot feedback. For leaders, we have a number of planning and implementation supports. So we really understand that districts have unique contexts. Everyone's in a different place and needs different supports. And so we do have a set of one-on-one supports built out for districts. So you'll be signing up for January one-on-one consultations for pre-pilot planning to really discuss any specific needs or questions or concerns from your district on launching the pilot. We'll have another one of those at the end as well to kind of reflect on the pilot, discuss next steps, what this looks like if you do decide to scale as well. All of our CRIMSI initiative leads for districts will also have a point of contact. So they'll have one person that they can reach out to if they have questions, if they want to schedule a quick, let's jump on the phone for 20 minutes and talk through this problem I'm having, so that in addition to our general help desk, our district initiative leads have one person who's really with them along the journey here. And then the last one-on-one support we'll be providing is a dashboard to support initiative leads in monitoring participant completion of the requirements. So you'll have dashboard just for your district where you can see each of your participants and where they are in meeting those requirements. And one of our expectations for district initiative leads is that you do help monitor that and help support participants in knocking out those requirements by the end of the pilot. In addition to those one-on-one supports, we'll have a series of collective learning and communities of practice for leaders as well. So there'll be a set of additional modules that are just for leaders. So an example of that would be a module on conducting vision walks. And then there'll be communities of practice to debrief on those. So communities of practice where we're really excited for leaders to engage with each other on how those vision walks went. District initiative leads will be required to attend those sessions. Leaders will also have access to both the teacher and coach collective learning. So again, they can get in there and see exactly what their teachers and coaches are working on. We especially recommend the coach collective learning around some of the leading those protocols for our school leaders for them to engage in through CRIMSI. So let's talk about next steps. So the first next step is going to be actually registering participants. So you've sent in your print orders, so we know how many spots you need. Now we need you to tell us who's going to be in those spots. So you'll be receiving a registration form later this month where you can sign up those individual teachers, coaches, and leaders for the pilot. And you have to have them registered in order to get their welcome letter and therefore access onboarding. So this will be due in January. This is where we really look to our district initiative leads to help make sure that everyone is registered prior to beginning the pilot. An important part of that registration is TEA Learn. So all of our CRIMSI courses are on TEA Learn, which is our Canvas platform. And so all participants have to have a TEA Learn account in order to access the pilot materials. As part of registration, one of the things we'll ask for is for the participant email they use for TEA Learn, which may or may not be the same as their district email, for example. Some participants will already have this if they've participated in another TEA course, such as reading academies, but some may not. And so we'll include instructions as part of registration that you can share with teachers and coaches and leaders on how to sign up if they don't already have a TEA Learn account. The other next step is to get ready for materials and assessments access. So as we noted earlier, print orders are in, publishers are printing away, getting ready to ship those out at beginning of January into February. And we'll have tracking information for your specific deliveries to your schools and districts soon. So what we ask for you is start planning to receive those materials and then distribute those out to teachers prior to starting to the pilot. So we know it can take a few days to turn around that distribution from the warehouse to individual classrooms. And so start thinking through what that process is going to look like. For digital materials, we will ask for you to decide for the products that have that capability if you do want to roster students. So we'll be sending out a follow-up survey to this informational that has a couple of different questions. And one of those will be, do you want to roster your students for these products? If you do, we'll then work on connecting you to the publishers to get that set up, because that will need to be set up before the pilot starts, so we can make sure that all of our teachers have access. And then finally, for the assessment platform, on that same follow-up survey, we'll ask you which assessment platform, a Dysphoria or DMAC, or neither, you have access to and want to use during the pilot. And then we can have follow-up conversations from there if you don't have access to a Dysphoria or DMAC on whether TFAR or the survey makes the most sense. Next, start planning for implementation. So we'll really dive into this more in our one-on-one consultations in January. But go ahead and start looking at that district and school calendar and figuring out where in that implementation window. So those yellow bars there are going to fall for your specific district or school. We know spring break is in there, so we'll need to be planning around that. And so start thinking about exactly when that falls. This is our general recommendation to start kind of the week after we kick off collective learning, but understand that that may be different for different districts. So one of the things we'll be talking about in that consultation is when you do plan to kick off. The other thing we ask you to start planning for is supporting your teachers, coaches, and leaders in completing those onboarding requirements. So that 3-week orange window there to knock out those asynchronous modules. Start thinking through how you want to support participants in doing that. One of the things that several of our full year districts found to be really successful was actually doing those together as part of a PLC. To take teachers and coaches and leaders through that all at once versus having them work on that kind of in their own time. But a lot of other districts, since they are asynchronous modules, just had those as an assignment for teachers to complete over the time period. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, start engaging your pilot teachers, coaches, and leaders. And this is one of the most important steps you can take, is starting to really engage them and get buy-in for the pilot, start getting folks excited to kick this off in the spring. And one of the most important parts of that is really communicating the why. So all of y'all have a reason you signed up for CRIMSI. It's all about supporting kiddos, really being able to communicate that to the folks participating in the pilot to get them excited to join. And we'll have some follow-ups as part of your leader supports that'll provide you with some additional ideas on how to do this. Some draft communications you can adapt and send out to your teachers, coaches, and leaders to start getting them excited about the pilot. And finally, just want to thank you for partnering with us in this important work. We're really excited about what we've been doing with full year CRIMSI, and we're really excited to expand that to a whole new set of districts through spring CRIMSI. So just really appreciate all of you who are getting ready to dive into what is very important work in supporting kids and catching up in Texas. All right, so if you do have questions, we'll have some time now for Q&A. And then you can also submit a ticket to the instructional materials and implementation help desk. So we have the link there. In our follow-up email, in addition to that survey, we will be sharing this PowerPoint and the recording of this session for you to reference. And I will now open it up for questions. Have a question here. Do we have an approximate amount of time to complete the 3 teacher modules? So we're still scoping out exactly what that looks like, but I think our full year is a good example. Those are 90 minutes per module, and it's blended. So teachers generally do 30 minutes of asynchronous pre-work or post-work, and then they have a 60-minute live session. And so I think that is probably what we'll end up doing here, but we'll make that final decision and then share that out with folks with the schedule as we get it. I have another question about doing the pilot module from April 21st through June 2nd. So that'll be a great thing to discuss in the consultations, or we can even set up time to discuss earlier. We'll just have to think about, especially if it's for 312 and not K2, think about how those teachers access the supports along the way for K2. How they access those supports along the way. So whether they attend collective learning on the same timeline so they can really start engaging with other teachers, or whether it's actually more of an asynchronous model where your district takes the collective learning and implements it on a different timeline. And so that's something we can discuss more to see what works best for your district. Deadline for teachers 3-5 to register for the pilot. January, but is there a date? So we'll have a bit of a rolling basis. We essentially need everyone to be registered before they start onboarding, but we'll continue adding folks as needed. So would aim for kind of MLK weekend in order to get that registration information in. The sooner we get it, the sooner we can send out those welcome communications and start getting teachers set up. So would encourage early January, but I think probably aiming for MLK Day there. Other than modules, what are requirements? So that's a really great question. So when we say coach, we mean that very broadly. We know for some folks that might be a dedicated instructional coach, other folks that might be the school leader, a district leader, potentially even y'all, in some cases a teacher leader. And so we really leave that up to y'all on who would be the right person to fill that role. We just ask that all CRIMSI teachers are supported by a coach. And that's another thing we can talk about in the pre-pilot consultations, because we know everyone has a different coaching model. So thinking through what both the coaching model, the coaching ratio looks like for supporting teachers during the pilot. And yes, you can have as many coaches as you want at one campus, working with different grade levels. Coaches will be cohorted at a grade band level. So they'll be working, for example, with K5. Amplify Eureka or PhD Science, but you can have multiple coaches there supporting different grade levels through that. Reporting and that follow-up survey as a follow-up to this, and ask you to get that survey back to us in the next week. And then we'll be providing additional registration information in the next couple of weeks. That is all we have for you today. I am going to stick around and answer any questions as they come up. But if you don't have any questions, then thank you so much for joining, and really excited to get to know all of you as we go on this adventure together.